God creating us for connection, for intimacy with Him and with one another, that has allowed me to see how powerful it is when people share their true stories. And for me, in the early days, when I was just sharing as part of, say, a weekend experience or something, I felt in myself how healing that was for me. And then other people could connect into that. It gave them courage, didn't it? When I was courageous to share from the hard parts of my story that ran the risk of allowing people to see my flaws. But in so doing, those flaws become like a sun catcher for God's glory, even in those wounded, hurt places. So that just got me passionate about the power of story, Ekanem.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mindy. I didn't even know that you had to, endure that sort of thing in your younger years, and you can't really experience life without having some kind of pain or loss or disappointment. And I think some of getting closer with God, that art of intimacy, is about being honest about those things and then trying to figure a way through. But sometimes in life, depending on the influences we have, we try to put on a facade and pretend as if it hasn't happened. And so the job of healing doesn't happen. I actually shared on my timeline just yesterday a quote from my book, which actually talked about time healing all wounds. But then I said, in reality, time doesn't heal any wounds if we don't do the work that's necessary for the healing to happen. And I think that's, it can be a challenge depending on what it was and the help that you find in getting through that. But I'm glad that we have conversations like this that can help with that, hopefully. Help
Yes, I
somebody.
agree with your critique of that saying. We should probably say that time hides all wounds,
Mm,
which is dangerous, right? Because then we think it's healed, we think it's gone. But how many people have these either just a silent suffering, or they do have eruptions in their lives, or like genuine nervous breakdowns or dissociative events? And that often comes from undealt with trauma
yeah.
that you've just stuffed and stuffed and stuffed, but you cannot stuff it down. There is nothing that can tamp down that volcano inside you if you don't seek the proper healing processes. It will come out in a violent explosion if you don't deal with it
Yeah. Did
in
you
a
find,
methodical way.
did you experience any of this along the journey towards your healing? Did you experience those eruptions or?
I tend towards anger. So I don't kind of roll up in a ball and melt in anxiety or something like that. I get angry. That to me feels way more powerful, which is a lie. But still, I believed that lie. And when I finally learned that anger is often a blustery mask for fear, I was like, oh no, not me. No way.
What
I'm
am I
not
afraid of?
afraid. I'm strong.
Yeah.
And I got in touch with the fear. Oh my word. I was so shocked and disappointed, but grateful, right? Because the anger was really harming my family.
Mm,
And I would have it well under control, and I never let it out when other people were around. But in the privacy of our own home, everybody was afraid of what's going to trigger mom.
mm,
I had already had a ton of healing by then, but I needed more.
yeah.
And I couldn't keep a lid on that. I could not control that because it was coming from yet more like the layers of the onion, got to peel down another layer and get down to another layer of healing. So yeah, that was a big shocker for me to realize that my powerful anger that made me feel so energized and hurt everyone around me
Yeah.
was actually stemming from fear.
I really like the way you've taken time to break that down because, especially with being a Christian, you obviously live in this constant expectation that you shouldn't do certain things or feel certain things or behave in certain ways. And I think that's why some of us might find it hard to share some of our stories sometimes when they are not so nice or a bit ugly. But being able to have someone present it that way and say, this is what you could potentially be feeling, and this is what you could do to change how you feel about something, makes the light at the tunnel possible for you to see, instead of just hiding in that emotion and that anger or whatever, dysfunctional behavior that you've been, displaying.
If we live in a little Christian, clean little, like fake Christian world, where we're all pretending to all walk in all the gifts of the Spirit all the time, then we cannot engage with our healing, because healing has to come from a place of gut-wrenching, shocking, shameful honesty. You can't deal with what you are deceived about. If you are lying to yourself, trying to pretend like a good little Christian lady, and you are not behaving like Christ all the time, which FYI, none of us is. If you can't be honest with yourself about what's going on, like with my anger, I blamed it on everyone else. I blamed it on a disobedient child. I blamed it on people who can't get their to-do list done. For goodness sakes, I am not asking too much. If you would just do what you were supposed to do, then I wouldn't have to get angry. Oh, no, 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 no. I'm the adult. I have to manage myself. But I let myself off the hook constantly by making excuses for myself. And if I wasn't being honest about the fact that I was behaving in a very contrary to Jesus manner, I'm not going to go seek healing for that, because it's everybody else's problem, not mine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thanks for taking it. I love the fact that you chose to use the example of the naughty child, because I'm sure there are lots of parents listening right now and thinking, okay, I probably need to have a rain check on my behavior with my kids. And that's not an excuse for, bad behavior on the kids' side. But I guess there's lots of more assertive ways we can deal with bad behavior rather than, using the poison or anger, which is often more reactive than responsive.
We're not talking about parenting strategies, but anger will when your children are younger, it will jerk them up and make them behave, but it destroys the intimacy that you have with them. So it doesn't work in the long run. It works in the short run. But then as soon as they get old enough to use that anger against you, oh, don't worry, you're teaching them. You're teaching them that's how it works. And when they get old enough, they'll come right back at you. And then it's like, oh, what have I done?
So it's about the seeds that we sow along the way. And it's actually part of framing that story that we want to write, isn't it? And sometimes we think writing our story or the power of our stories in this, final presentation. There's so much happening along the journey that is helping you to put another layer on that canvas, another shade of color on the canvas, really. And your emotions, you could actually look at your emotions as color in a particular picture. Yes. And so everything we're talking about now, I know it seems really deep, but it's actually the context of how powerful your story is and the role you play in writing that story.
Yeah, and back to the trying to see yourself as honestly as you can. Sometimes as Christians, when we sense emotions that we're kind of embarrassed about, it's like, oh boy, that's like the list of the opposite fruits of the Spirit. That's how I feel like I'm showing up often in my life. Then instead of trying to deny that or blame it on someone else, you get curious. Wow, look at me. Look at me. being so angry. Look at me. Being so envious. Look at me. Being so gluttonous. Look at me. Being so impatient. And you just get curious. I wonder why that's so hard for me. What a kind, gentle way to talk to yourself. And that is the beginning of healing, is getting curious about your emotions and being honest about them. That curiosity is such a powerful way to engage with kindness with yourself and to genuinely begin to seek for answers.
Thank you